Chapter 1: The Sun That Would Not Kill Him. The sun had decided to take its time with him. Caleb Ward lay against the crumbling bank of the dry wash, one hand pressed to the wet ruin below his ribs, and watched the light climb the sandstone wall on the far side inch by patient inch. He had been a rancher long enough to read a sky the way other men read a Bible, and this one told him plainly what it meant to do. It would not kill him with a bullet. It would do it slow, with heat and thirst, and it would take all the long day about it. The buzzards already knew. 3 of them turned in a lazy, unhurried wheel 1,000 feet up, tilting on the morning air, and every so often one would drop lower to look at him, then rise again, unconvinced he was ready. Not yet, he wanted to tell them. Not just yet, you patient devils. His horse was 10 feet away and would never rise. The big roan had gone down in the first volley, and Caleb had gone down with it, pinned a moment before he dragged himself free and crawled into what little shade the bank threw. There had been shade at dawn. There was less of it now. The blood had dried black on his shirt and gone tacky against his palm, and when he shifted, the wound woke up and reminded him, with a bright and personal cruelty, exactly where the ball had gone in. He tried to keep his mind on the here and the now, on the practical arithmetic of a man deciding whether to live, but the fever had other ideas. It kept dragging him backward. It had been the money. 3 seasons of it, driven north and sold honest. And he had been fool enough to ride back through the low country with the bank draft sewn into his coat and only Dyer for company. Dyer, who had worked his fences 2 years and eaten at his table. Dyer, who had reined up at the mouth of the wash and said, easy as weather, that a man ought to water his horse here, and then swung wide out of the line of fire while the riders came up out of the rocks. Caleb had seen the one who led them. A big man on a gray, a face like something carved wrong, an old white seam of scar running through one eyebrow so the brow never sat level. Vane. He'd heard the name spoken once in a saloon in Tucson and had thought little of it. He would not forget the face now. He had put a bullet into one of Vane's men before the ball took him in the side and the world tipped sideways. And the last clear thing he'd carried down into the dark was Dyer not looking at him, Dyer already turning his horse. "Water your horse," Caleb said aloud to nobody, and the sound of his own cracked voice startled him. He laughed, which was a mistake. The laugh turned the wound into a live thing, and he stopped. He thought about his mother, dead 20 years, and how she had taught him to say his prayers, and found he could not remember the words to any of them. He thought about the ranch instead, the long, low house he had built with his own hands, the cottonwoods along the creek that he had planted as switches and that now threw shade for the whole yard, the 200 head that would go feral or be scattered by winter with no man to hold them. A life's work, and it would come to nothing because he had trusted a man who watered his horse. There was a lesson in that. He was too tired to learn it. A word had always been the whole of Caleb Ward. His own word given was a thing he had never once broken, and he had built everything he owned on the strength of it and expected the same coin from other men. That was the flaw in him, he saw now, clear as the climbing light. He had believed Dyer's word because his own was good. A man measures the world with the rule he carries, and Caleb's rule had been too honest to reckon a traitor by. Well, he would die honest anyhow. There were worse ways. The light kept climbing. He shut his eyes. She had been reading their sign since the gray light before dawn. Nolly moved along the rim of the wash on foot. Her pony left ground-tied a quarter-mile back in a stand of mesquite, and she went the way she always went in enemy country, low, slow, and without hurry, letting her eyes do the walking first. The riders had come through here in the night. 9 of them she had counted, then 11, then 9 again where 2 had cut away and rejoined. Shod horses, all of them, iron on stone, careless men who did not think anyone worth fearing was watching. She had been 3 days on their trail. She knew the length of their strides and the set of their camps, and the fact that one of them rode a horse that favored its off hind. And she knew, without ever having seen their faces, that they were the men she had come this far south to find. So the dead horse below did not surprise her. Ambush country, she had smelled the place for what it was a mile back. What surprised her was that the shape in the shade was breathing. She crouched at the rim and went still as the rock, and gave it a long count. A man, a white man big through the shoulders, gone the gray-yellow color that came before the end. One hand at his side and the dark that had spread from under it. His chest rose, fell, rose again with a catch in it. Not a corpse yet then. A corpse that had not been told. For a while she only watched. She owed this stranger nothing, less than nothing, His kind had names for hers that were not words, and a bounty rode on her whole band this season, a price a man could collect on any Apache scalp and no questions asked which shoulders it had come off. To go down there was to leave sign. To leave sign was to be a woman alone in country where being seen was the same as being dead. The riders would come back this way. They always came back to be sure of their work or to strip what they'd left. A wise scout would note the living man, mark the place, and move on to the trail she had come for. She was a wise scout. She had buried enough people to have earned the wisdom, and she had learned young that the desert did not reward tenderness. It rewarded the ones who saw clearly and chose coldly and did not spend on a stranger what they would need for their own. Her grandmother had told her that. Her grandmother had also, in the same breath, taught her which plants closed a wound and which brought down a fever, as though a person might need both kinds of knowing in one lifetime, the hardness and the mercy, and would have to learn where the line between them fell on her own. But she had also carried a brother down off a mesa with a hole in him this same size, and had reached water too late, and she knew the particular weight of a life that could still be caught if a body was only quick and unafraid. And there was this which she did not examine too closely. The man had put up a fight. There was a second dark stain in the sand out where the rocks began, not his, and a torn strip of another man's shirt caught on a thorn. He had marked one of them going down. Whatever he was, he had not simply knelt for it. Nolly let her breath out slow. Then she went over the rim, down the crumbling bank in 3 long silent steps, and knelt beside him in the shade the sun was stealing. Up close he was worse. She peeled his hand from the wound, he groaned, deep, not conscious, and put her own flat over the place, feeling the pulse of it against her palm. Low in the side, below the ribs, the ball had gone in and her fingers told her along his back had not come out. Bad. But the blood came steady and dark, not the bright froth that meant it had found the lung, and he had bled a great deal without dying, which said something stubborn about the animal of him. She lifted an eyelid with her thumb. Dry, but the eye rolled and found a scrap of light. "HNH," she said under her breath, a man too dumb to know he was finished. She looked at the sun, at the shrinking shade, at the wash that ran east toward the broken country where she knew a seep the riders did not. She looked at the 10 miles of open ground between here and there and did the cold sum of it, his weight, her strength, the hours, the chance. It did not come out well. It did not come out well at all. And there was the other side of the ledger, the side her grandmother had not needed to name. A white man traveling with her was a rope for both their necks. If a patrol found them, no one would ask why. He would be a captive at best, and she would be a scalp with a dollar figure on it. Every mile she kept him alive, she carried that too. She looked back at his face. His eyes had opened, truly opened this time, pale and swimming and fixed on her with the flat astonishment of a man who had made his peace with buzzards and gotten a woman instead. His lips moved. No sound came, then a scrape of one. "Are you?" The word died. Maybe he had meant real, maybe angel. She would never know and was glad of it. Nolly leaned close so he would hear, and said the only thing there was to say, quiet level, a promise made to the sun as much as to him. "Not today." His eyes held on hers a moment, as if he were deciding whether to believe her. Then they slid closed, but she felt the change in him, the small surrender of a man handing his weight to someone else's hands. She got her arm under his shoulders. That was when she saw the dust. It rose in the east, low and long, hanging gold in the new light where the wash bent, the kind of dust that shod horses made coming at a walk, coming back. She went flat on instinct, dragging him half across her and counted her own heartbeat until she was sure. Not one rider, several. Doubling back to be certain of their morning's work, exactly as she had known they would. There was no time now for the 10 miles. There was no time for anything but the deeper cut in the bank 40 feet on, where the wash undercut itself, and a man might be lost in shadow if he were dragged there fast and lay still and lucky. "You will not thank me for this," she breathed, and got both hands fisted in the back of his coat. Then she pulled, heels dug, back bent, every cord in her standing out, hauling 200 pounds of dying stranger through the sand while behind her the dust climbed higher, and under it now, faint and growing and steady as her own pulse, came the sound of hooves. Chapter 2, What the Desert Taught Her. The seep was not a place a man would ever find on his own. Nolly brought Caleb to it the way she brought everything to it, by knowing, not by looking. The rock folded back on itself where a dry ravine pinched shut, and behind a curtain of ocotillo and old flood rack there was a shallow cave, and at the back of the cave, a dark seam in the stone wept water so slowly a person could count the drops. She had known of it since she was a girl. Enemy country now, all of it, but the water did not know that, and the water was why she was alive and why he might be. She dragged him the last of the way on a travois she had cut and lashed in the time it took the rider's dust to swell and thin on the flats below. He did not help her. He could not. He hung in the rawhide like something already given back to the ground, and only the small pull of his breath told her different. Inside, out of the sun, she went to work. She had done this before. That was the thing the man would never understand, waking or dead, that her hands did not shake, that she did not pray over him or weep, because weeping was for after and there was no after yet. She cut his shirt away from the wound with a horn-handled knife worn thin at the edge. The bullet had gone in low on his left side and had not come out. That was bad. But it had missed the deep places, or he would already be cold, and that was the desert's one mercy, and she took it without thanks. She built a fire small as a cupped hand, back where the smoke could thread up through a crack and lose itself in the rock before it ever showed sky. She heated the knife blade until it glowed dull. Then she leaned her whole weight across his chest, put a folded strip of leather between his teeth, and laid the iron to the torn flesh. He came up off the stone screaming into the leather. She rode him down. "Quiet," she said, close to his ear, not unkind and not gentle either. "Quiet, or you bring them back on both of us." He could not have understood the words. The sound of them reached him anyway, and some animal part of him obeyed, and the scream folded down into a shuddering groan and then into nothing as the pain took him under again. She packed the seared wound with the inner pulp of the plants she carried, the ones that drew out heat and rot, gray-green and bitter, and bound it with strips of his own shirt. She washed her hands in a bare palmful of water and no more. Water was counted now. She had one skin, 3/4 full, and the seep would give perhaps a cup between one sun and the next. 2 mouths. She did the arithmetic without feeling and set the skin where he could not knock it over in his fever. Twice that first night riders passed on the flats. She heard them before the rock did the loose chink of a bit, a horse blowing, a man's cough carried too far in the cold air. Both times she was already over Caleb with her hand flat and firm across his mouth, her knife loose in the other, watching the mouth of the cave and breathing slow so her own breath would not give them away. Both times the sounds thinned and were gone north, toward the wagon road, toward whatever veins men thought they were still chasing. She did not move until the quiet had held long enough to trust. Then she fed the man water drop by drop off her fingertips, because a man in fever will drink himself sick if you let him, and she did not intend to have saved his life only to drown it. That was the second day and the third, and she lost the fourth to the sameness of it. The fire, the water counted, the plants renewed, the fever climbing and breaking and climbing again. She talked to him sometimes, low, in her own tongue, not because he could hear but because a voice steadied a fevered man the way it steadied a frightened horse. She told him things she would not have told him awake. That she had been 3 weeks in this country cutting Vane's sign, alone, because the men who had raided her band's horses and put a bounty on her people's heads rode for Vane, and someone had to know his ways before her people could answer him. That she had not meant to find a dying rancher in a dry wash. That she had almost ridden on, and would have been right to, and had not, and could not now name the reason she had turned her horse around. Almost, she said, and looked at his gray face and did not finish it. The desert had taught her many hard things across the years, where the water hid, which men lied, how long a body took to give up. It had never taught her why she had knelt in that wash when leaving him would have been the wiser road. Perhaps some lessons the land kept back for later. On the 5th day the fever broke for good, and the man tried to kill her. She felt at the moment his breathing changed, the long, ragged draw of the sick giving way to something shallow and aware. She was crouched at the fire with her back half to him, and she saw his eyes come open, saw them find her, saw the exact instant a stranger became, to him, a threat. His hand crawled to his hip. His holster was empty. His revolver was already tucked in the back of her own belt, where it had been since the wash, and she had known this moment would come from the first hour, and had prepared for it the way she prepared for everything. "It is not there," she said in English now, plain and dry. "I have it. You may have it back when you can lift it without falling over, which is not today." He stared at her, his mouth worked. His voice, when it came, was a ruin of a thing, cracked all through. "Who?" He stopped, swallowed against a throat like sand. "Who are you?" "Nolly." She filled the horn cup 2 fingers deep and held it out. "Drink. Slow. If you gulp it, you will bring it back up, and I do not carry enough water for you to waste." He did not take the cup. He looked at it and at her, and she watched him try to build the world back up out of pieces, the cave, the fire, the woman, the hole in his side that was a clean ache now instead of a killing one. "You," he said. "You're the one who—" He touched the bound wound, winced, understood. "Yes. Why?" It was the question everyone came to. She had asked it of herself over him for 5 nights. "Because you are not dead yet," she said, which was the truest answer and the only one she had. "Drink." This time he drank. His hand shook so badly she had to steady the cup, her fingers over his, and neither of them remarked on it. When he had it down, he lay back against the stone, spent by that small thing, and studied her with eyes gone sharp again under all the weakness. "You're Apache." "I am, and you are a long way from anyone who would call that a comfort." She let that sit. "The men who shot you, you saw them." Something moved behind his face, memory, and the anger under it. "I saw them. I saw the man who ran them." His jaw set. "Fella named Vane, and I saw my own partner ride in with him, easy as Sunday, after I'd trusted him with a season's cattle money." The words cost him. "I can name Vane in any court in the territory. I'm the only man alive who can put his face to that road." Nolly went very still. For 3 weeks she had cut this man's sign across the desert and never once had his face. Now a half-dead rancher lay in her cave and carried it behind his eyes. "Then you are worth more alive than I thought," she said slowly, "and so am I for keeping you. Those same men carry a bounty for my people. You can hang Vane. I can warn my band before he brings the army down on them. We want the same man dead or caged." She looked at him levelly. "That does not make us friends, rancher. It makes us useful to each other. It will do." A dry sound came out of him that she realized after a moment was a laugh. "Caleb," he said. "Since we're being useful, Caleb Rourke." He shifted, testing the wound, and the color went out of him all over again. "How long till I can ride?" She had been dreading the question because the answer was the whole shape of their trouble. "You will not ride for many days. That wound is deeper than it looks, and it will open if you sit a horse. And the country between here and any place you call home crawls with Vane's men, and with the rival hands who work these draws, and none of them love your face or mine." She fed a twig to the fire. "So we walk when you can walk, at night, my way, or we do not go at all." He took it better than she expected. A man used to being obeyed, she thought, learning the taste of being kept alive by someone he could not command. "Your way," he said, and closed his eyes. He slept the clean sleep after that, the mending kind, and she let herself rest against the cave wall with the revolver at her back, and both their lives balanced in her lap. It was near dusk, the light going copper at the cave's mouth, when she rose to renew the plants and stepped without thinking toward the shadowed seam of rock where the ocotillo grew thickest. "Don't," the word came from behind her, low and urgent and wrecked. "Nolly, don't, you're left down." She froze, turned only her eyes. Coiled in the cool of the rock, a hand's breadth from where her bare foot would have gone, the rattlesnake lay thick as her wrist, its tail lifted but not yet singing, its wedge head tracking her stillness. She had walked half asleep straight to it. 5 nights guarding a stranger's life, and she had nearly spent her own on a moment's carelessness. Slow as the water dropping, she drew her foot back. The snake held, then eased, then poured itself away into the dark of the seam and was gone. She let her breath out. When she looked back, Caleb had pushed up on one elbow, sweat standing on him from the cost of it, having seen the thing from across the cave in the failing light and spent strength he did not have to call out. For a moment neither of them said the useful, unfriendly things they had agreed on. "Thank you," she said, quietly. It was the first soft thing she had said to him awake. He eased back down, satisfied, already gray again. "Now we're useful both ways," he murmured, and the corner of his mouth moved before sleep took him. Nolly stood a long while in the copper light, the fire small behind her, listening to the man breathe. She had told herself it made them nothing but useful. She was a scout, and a good one, and a good scout did not lie to herself about the ground she stood on. The ground had just shifted a little, and she had felt it. Chapter 3, Enemy Ground. They moved at night, because the day belonged to Vane. Nolly had said it plainly, crouched at the mouth of the seep while the last light bled out of the west. In the sun, a man is a shadow anyone can find. In the dark, he is only sound. We make no sound. She had looked at the way he held his side and added, dry as the wash below them, "You especially." Caleb had learned in 2 days not to argue with her about the desert. He had argued about everything else, whether he could walk, whether a man ought to let a woman shoulder his rifle like it was nothing, and lost each time, the way a creek loses to stone. But the desert was hers the way the range was his, and he had sense enough to know the difference. So he walked when she walked, stopped when her hand rose, and put his boots where her moccasins had been. The first hour cost him. The wound in his side was a live coal packed in mud and yarrow, and every step pulled at it. He kept his breathing slow and let the pain come and go like weather. He would not be the reason they were found. By the second hour, the moon had cleared the far ridges, and he could see her ahead of him, the straight line of her back, the rifle, the long braid gone silver. She did not walk like a person crossing ground. She walked like a person the ground had agreed to. "How do you know where we are?" he said low when the wash widened enough that his voice would not carry. "No trail, no stars I trust." She did not turn. "There." She lifted her chin toward the sky, and he followed it to a cluster of hard little lights low in the north. "Those do not move like the others. My grandmother's grandmother followed them. When I was small, she made me name them before she would feed me." A pause. "I was hungry very often." It surprised a laugh out of him, quiet and quick, and it pulled the wound, and he pressed his arm against it. "The ground," he asked. "The ground tells more than the sky." Now she did glance back, a pale gleam of eye in the dark. "The sky only says where. The ground says who came here and when and whether they were afraid." She stepped down into a lower shelf of the wash and put her hand flat behind her weight, then let him follow. "2 nights ago, 4 horses came through here, shod, heavy in the shoulder, men who do not know how to spare a horse in this country." She said it the way another person might read a letter. "Your friends." "They're not my friends." "No," she started forward again. "But they are looking for you. That makes them yours a little, the way a wound is yours." He thought about that, boots and moccasins ghosting over the sand. She told him things in the dark that he did not think she would have told him in the day. She scouted for her band, she said. When the soldiers and the men like Vane pressed in from every side, someone had to be the eyes, and she had made herself into eyes. The land was not a thing they owned, but a thing they belonged to, a harder claim that could not be sold. And that was exactly why men who understood only owning had stopped trying to understand it and started shooting instead. She told him once, without weight, that she'd had a husband 3 years dead of a fever, the traders brought up from the river with their blankets and their whiskey, and that she had learned every plant that fought fever the winter after, too late to matter, because a person had to do something with grief or the grief did something with them. Caleb did not fill the silence with the things men filled such silences with. He had buried people. He knew the shape of a quiet that did not want mending. "I'm sorry," he said, and only that, and meant it plain. "You did not bring the blankets," she said. "No, but I'm sorry all the same. A thing can be true and not your fault." She was quiet a long moment. Then, "Yes," she said, and it sounded almost like she was learning the idea from him, turning it over. "That is a true thing." They walked. Somewhere in the 3rd hour, he stopped thinking of her as the woman who had saved him. Gratitude could be carried only so far before it turned into something with more weight, respect. The kind you gave another hand who read the country the way you read cattle, who had kept you alive not by luck but by knowing. He stopped watching her the way you watch a rescuer, and started watching her the way you watch a partner on a hard drive, for her sign, her read, the set of her shoulders that told you trouble before your own eyes could. "You've gone quiet," she said. "Thinking that I've been treating you like you pulled me out of a ditch," he said. "And that's not the whole of it. You know this country like I know a herd in a storm. That's not rescuing, that's craft." "I ought to have said so." He could not see her face, but something eased in the line of her back, some small guard set down. "Say it that way to my brother when you meet him. He thinks a white man cannot see it." "Will I meet your brother?" "If we live." She said it lightly. It did not feel light. Near the false dawn, they came to the river. It was not much of a river, a broad, shallow braid sliding brown over gravel between cut banks, but it lay across their line like a drawn blade, and on the far side the ground rose toward the country that would take them home. Nolly went down the bank ahead of him, testing the current where a gravel bar made a natural ford. "Here," she said, "before the light. We cross while the men still sleep." Caleb had come up beside her, and he was not looking at the water. He was looking upstream north, where the river came out of canyon country he could not see, and he had gone very still, the stillness of a man who has spent his life reading a sky for what it means to animals who cannot afford to be wrong. "No," he said. She looked at him. It was the first time he had told her no about the desert, and he felt the whole weight of it and said it again anyway. "Not here, not now." He pointed north with his chin the way she did. "Smell that on the wind coming down the canyon? Wet ground, rain up high hours ago in mountains we can't see." A muscle worked in his jaw. "The water's brown, and it's brown wrong, carrying redder mud than this gravel'd make. That comes from high up and fast." He crouched, laid 2 fingers flat against the wet gravel at the water's edge. "And it's rising, since we stood here. Look at your own mark." She looked. Where her foot had pressed the gravel a minute before, the water had crept up and filled it and was reaching past it. "Flash flood," Caleb said. "Coming down that canyon behind the water we can see. If we're on that bar when the head of it comes, it'll take us and we won't hear it till it's on us." He straightened, careful of his side. "On the range you learn to hate a low crossing worse than you hate a rattler. A rattler at least gives you the courtesy of a sound." For a long moment, Nolly did not move. She was a person who did not like being wrong in the one place she was never wrong. He watched her choose the truth over the pride, the way she'd made him choose it, and then she stepped back from the water and pulled him with a hand on his arm. "Higher," she said, "now." They had barely gained the second bench when they heard it, a sound with no shape to it at first, a low grinding sigh that rose into a roar. And then the head of the flood came around the bend, brown and boiling and carrying whole trees like kindling, and went over the gravel bar where they would have stood and erased it as if it had never been. They watched the river eat the crossing hole. "Craft," Nolly said at last over the roar, and there was something new in her voice, not surprise exactly. "An accounting. You have some of your own." "I've been useless 3 days," Caleb said. "Let a man have the one thing." She almost smiled, then decided the country was too dangerous for it. They found the wagon at gray light, when the flood had passed and the crossing had gone shallow again a mile down. It sat burned on the far bench, black ribs against the paling sky, and they crossed because Nolly would not pass signs she could not read. The oxen were gone, the people gone. The fire was days old, and the arrows in the scorched sideboards had been put there after. Caleb saw, driven by hand into wood already burned, the way a man plants a lie. "These are not ours," Nolly said, low and hard, drawing one free and turning it in the strengthening light, her thumb moving over the fletching, the paint. "Made to look like ours, made wrong. A soldier who wanted a reason would not care." She let it fall. "They burn a wagon and blame us, the bounty on my band grows, the army sends men, and Vane collects on every scalp the law will pay for." Her jaw was iron. "He is not only hunting you, Caleb." Caleb crouched by the cold ash and understood, finally, that the 2 things he had thought separate, the men who wanted him dead for a face he'd seen, and the men who wanted her people gone for a price on their heads, were not 2 things at all. They were one hand, and the hand was Vane's, and it reached from this burned wagon back to the dry wash where a dying stranger had watched an outlaw's face in the sun. "Then we're hunting the same man," he said quietly. "We have been the whole time." "Yes," Nolly said. She looked at him across the black ribs of the wagon, the dawn coming up behind her, and neither of them said the thing that sat between them plain as the light. "We have been the whole time." They made a cold camp that morning in a hollow of rock above the river. No fire, because a fire in that country was a signature. They ate dried meat, drank sparingly, and lay in the thin gray shade to wait out the day. He was aware of her the way you are aware of warmth in cold country. She lay close, because the rock was small and the wind came through it, and there was nothing in it but sense, and it was not only sense. River silt had dried pale on the back of her hand where it rested on the stone between them, close enough to cover with his own. He looked at her hand, she looked at him looking. For a breath the whole desert held still, the flood spent, the enemy named, the long road home stretched out under a rising sun neither of them yet trusted, and his hand moved half an inch toward hers on the cold stone. Then a hawk cried out over the river, and she turned her head to mark it, and the moment folded itself away, careful and unhurried, the way she did everything. "Sleep," Nolly said low to the rock to the day to him. "I will watch first." Caleb drew his hand back. "I'll take second, that's not up for argument." In the gray hollow unseen, she let the smile come this time, just once, just for the stone. "No," she agreed, "it is not." Chapter 4, The Weight of a Word. The storm came down out of the north before dawn, and Nolly smelled it a full hour before the first cold gust reached them. She had turned them east while it was still dark, off the wash they had been following, and by the time the sky went the color of a bruise, she had them wedged into a box canyon so narrow a man could touch both walls with his arms spread. Caleb had learned not to ask where she was taking him. He simply followed the pale shape of her shoulders through the dark and trusted that she saw what he could not. The rain broke as they reached the deep cleft at the canyon's end, a black overhang of rock with a floor of dry sand and old ash where others had sheltered before them, and Nolly pulled him under it just as the first sheets of water came roaring down the stone. It was not a gentle rain. It fell like it meant to scour the country clean, and within minutes a brown ribbon of runoff was hissing past their feet where dust had been. "We do not move today," she said. She said it the way she said most things, plain, without apology, a fact laid down. "The washes will run high until the sun is gone again. Anything out in it drowns. Then I reckon we wait." Caleb eased himself down against the rock, one hand pressed flat to his side where the wound still pulled at him like a fishhook set in the meat. He had ridden 2 nights on it now, and it had not torn, but it never let him forget it was there. "Won't say I'm sorry to sit still a spell." She crouched to build a small fire of the dry brush stacked in the back of the cleft, feeding it slow so the smoke thinned to nothing against the black roof of stone. In the growing light he watched her hands. He had spent a good many days watching her hands. They never fumbled, never hurried, never did a thing twice that could be done once. He had known men who fancied themselves competent. He had never known anyone made entirely of it, the way she was. "You keep looking at me like that," she said without turning. "You will wear a hole in me." "I'm learning," he said. "Learning what?" "How you do it, how you always know." He nodded at the wall of water. "I'd have run us straight into that, been laid out at the bottom of some wash by first light and never known what killed me." She sat back on her heels. The firelight moved on her face and made her older and younger at once. "The land tells you," she said. "It is always talking. Most men are too loud to hear it." A pause, and then, quieter, the nearest thing to a joke she'd offered him yet. "You are quieter than most for a white man." He laughed, and it hurt his side, and he laughed anyway. "High praise." They ate a little of the dried meat she carried, and drank sparingly from the water bag she had filled at the seep 2 nights back, and the storm settled into a long, steady drumming that walled the world off. There was nowhere to go and nothing to do but talk, and so, slowly, they talked. He told her about the ranch first, because it was safe ground. The spread up on the Shenegala, the good grass, the well he'd dug by hand the first summer, the 140 head Vane's men had scattered and stolen the day they'd put a bullet in him and left him for the buzzards. He told it flat, but she heard the grief under it, the way a man grieves a thing he built with his own 2 hands. "You will get it back," she said. "Maybe." He turned his hat in his hands. "A man's got to be alive to get anything back. That part's still up for a vote." She looked at him a long moment across the little fire. "You are alive because I decided you would be," she said. "Do not vote against my work." That struck him as the truest and strangest thing anyone had ever said to him, and he sat with it. Then he set his hat down on the sand, deliberately, the way a man sets down a thing he means to be done with, and he looked at her straight. "Nolly, I want to say something, and I want you to hear it as what it is." He waited until her eyes came up to his and stayed. "You've kept me breathing when you owed me nothing. You've walked me across country that kill me in a day alone, and every one of those days you were more likely than not to catch a bullet meant for the man beside you. I can't pay that back. There's no coin for it. But I can give you the one thing I've never broke in my life." "And what is that?" "My word." He said it like a man laying a stone. "I give you my word I'll see you home to your people, all the way. Whatever comes between here and there, it comes through me first. I don't die easy and I don't quit, and I'll not leave your side till you're standing safe among your own. That's a vow. Where I come from, a man's word is the only thing that's truly his, the one country he's king of, and I'm giving you the run of mine." The rain filled the silence. Something moved behind her eyes, some old thing shifting, and for once her hands were still in her lap and she let them be. "I have had men's words before," she said at last. Her voice had gone low and careful, the voice of someone stepping across rotten ice. "A man gave me his word once. He was of my band. He said he would stand between my brother and the soldiers at the river, and instead he ran, and my brother, the young one, not Dotest, my brother did not come back from that water. The man kept his life and lost his name. We do not speak it now." She looked into the fire. so you will understand why a word is a small thing to me. It is air. It costs nothing to say and everything to keep, and most men learn the difference only when it is too late for the one who believed them. Caleb did not rush to fill the space she'd opened. He'd learned that from her too. "Then don't believe me yet," he said. "Watch me, that's all I ask. A word's worth exactly what a man does with it, and I've got a whole hard road left to show you what mine's worth." She studied him for a long time. Then she nodded once, and something in her shoulders came down that he had never seen come down before. "We will see," she said, but she did not say it like a wall. She said it like a door left open a crack. The storm ran on into the afternoon. To pass it, she taught him things, and this was its own kind of gift, that she would give him her knowledge and not hoard it as most would. She showed him how to walk on the outside edges of his feet, rolling the weight, so that even on gravel he made no sound. She made him cross the sand toward her again and again until she could sit with her back turned and not hear him come. She showed him how to read a trail in his mind, to see not just the track but the story of it, the weight of the animal, the hour it passed, whether it walked easy or ran afraid. "You've got a gift for it," she admitted, grudging, when he named a coyote's passage from a scuff she'd half erased to test him. "I had a good teacher, and he gave back what he had." He knew cattle and weather and horses the way she knew stone and water, and he told her how a herd moves before a storm, how a horse will warn you of a snake or a man long before your own eyes will, how to read the sky's high cloud for the flood 2 days off. She listened the way she did everything wholly, taking it in and putting it away where she could find it, and he understood that this was the shape of the thing between them now. Not a woman saving a helpless man, not that at all. Two people, each master of a country the other had never walked, trading the keys across a small fire while the rain came down. Somewhere in it, the space between them had closed without either of them deciding it should. She was showing him the set of a snare, her hands over his hands, and he turned his head and she had turned hers, and they were near enough that he could see the fire caught in her eyes and the rain caught in her hair, and neither of them moved back. "Nolly," he said very low. "Do not," she whispered, but she did not pull away, and her whisper was not a no. It was the sound of someone standing at the edge of something high and deep. "If I let you say it, I cannot unhear it." "Then let me." The horse screamed. Not their pack pony, tied deep in the cleft. A horse out in the canyon, and a man's low curse cut off short, and Nolly was already up and moving, blade in her hand, no wasted motion, gone from him to the mouth of the overhang like smoke pulled by a draft. Caleb came up after her, slower, the wound a hot wire in his side, dragging his pistol from his belt. The rain had thinned to a gray drizzle. A rider sat his horse 50 feet off where the canyon narrowed, hunched in an oilskin, and Caleb knew the cut of him even before he saw the face, one of Vane's, a lean man with a rifle scabbard and a hunter's stillness that broke the instant he saw them. He'd been tracking the flood-scoured wash for sign, and found more than sign. "Well now," the man started, wheeling his horse, reaching. He never finished it. Nolly was on him before the rifle cleared, and Caleb was moving too, the old strength coming back into him raw and clumsy but coming, and when the man's boot swung a pistol toward her, Caleb hit him bodily and took them both down into the mud. It was short and ugly and close. Caleb felt his stitches go, felt the hot, wet spread down his side even as he wrenched the gun loose, felt Nolly's blade finish what his weight had begun. Then it was over, and the two of them were down in the streaming mud, with a dead man between them and the rain running pink into the sand. But there had been 2 horses. Nolly was on her feet in an instant, her head up, and Caleb followed her stare down the canyon to where a second rider was already small and going, laid flat along his horse's neck, spurring hard for the open country and the men who would want to hear what he had seen. "He was watching the mouth," she said. Her voice had gone cold and flat and certain, all the warmth of the fire scoured out of it. "He saw us both. He knows my face now and yours and the way we are heading." She pressed her hand hard to Caleb's side where the blood came, and her eyes came up to his, and there was no more crack of a door left open, no near thing unsaid. There was only the country ahead and the enemy loose in it. "They are coming," she said, "all of them now. And we are seen." Chapter 5 Hunted. The rider who got away carried their lives in his saddlebags now, and Nolly knew it before the dust of him had settled. She crouched at the mouth of the box canyon in the gray before dawn, one hand flat on the cold stone, and read the ground the way another woman might read a letter from home. Two sets of prints going out, one coming back, one leaving fast, the hoof marks thrown wide and deep where the horse had been driven hard toward the flats, toward Vane. "He'll reach them by mid-morning," she said. Caleb sat with his back against the rock where she had bound him in the night, his shirt dark and stiff with old blood along the side. The fight in the canyon had torn the wound open again, and though she had packed it fresh with the dried leaves she carried folded in buckskin, she did not like the gray at the edges of his mouth. "Then we move," he said, and got his feet under him without asking for her hand. She marked that. He had stopped reaching for her arm 3 days ago. It was not pride. It was that he had decided not to spend her strength on things he could do himself, and she found the decision harder to look away from than any wound. "We move," she agreed, "but not the way they think." They did not go north, toward the settlements and the straight road home. That was the road Vane would draw a line across, and the deputy with him, the man with the star who took Vane's coin and called it law. Nolly had crossed that man's trail twice, and both times someone she loved had paid for it. She turned them east instead, into broken country where the washes ran like the veins on the back of an old woman's hand, tangled and shallow and going nowhere a map would admit. "You're taking us wrong," Caleb said low, keeping pace at her shoulder. Not an accusation, a rancher's habit of speaking his read aloud. "I am taking us wrong on purpose," she said. "A man who hunts follows the sensible trail. We will not leave him one." She showed him then, as the sun climbed white and merciless, what her people had taught her when she was small enough to ride in front of her mother. She walked them down a dry wash where the gravel held no print, setting his boot and her moccasin only on the flat backs of stones. At a fork she sent a false trail up the wrong branch, a dragged heel, a broken twig set just so, a smear of Caleb's blood pressed to a rock where a tracker's eye would snag, then backed them out stepping in their own prints and took the true branch on the stones. "They'll waste half a day up that draw," Caleb said, watching her work with something close to wonder. "Perhaps a full day if the deputy leads. He is proud. He will not turn back until the trail dies in his hands." "And Vane." Her jaw set. "Vane is not proud. Vane is patient. He will not follow the sign at all. He will guess where we are going and ride to meet us there." She looked at him. "Which is why we are not going where we are going." Caleb almost smiled through the gray. "You just say things like that to watch me chew on them." "A little," she admitted, and it startled a rough laugh out of him that he pressed down quick, because sound carried in that country like a shout across water. By afternoon, the sky did them the first kindness it had shown in a week. Nolly smelled it before she saw it, the copper weight in the air, the way the light went bruised and green along the western rim. She had been praying to no one in particular for exactly this. She turned them hard toward the coming storm instead of away from it, and Caleb, God help him, followed without a word, though every instinct a man owns tells him to run from the black walls stacking up over the mountains. "Trust me the next hour," she said, "and after it there will be no trail at all." "I've trusted you since the wash," he said. "This is just the loud part." The rain came like it meant to drown the whole territory. It came sideways, it came in ropes, it turned the dust to running water, and Nolly walked them straight through the heart of it along the very washes she had been avoiding, because now the washes were rivers, and rivers keep no secrets. Every print they left filled and smoothed and was gone in the space of a breath. She kept one hand fisted in the back of Caleb's shirt so the storm could not take him from her, and she felt him lean into her hold, not from weakness now, but because it was the only thing in the roaring world that was solid, and she was that thing, and she found she did not mind being it. "You're grinning," he shouted over the rain, water streaming off the brim of the hat she'd found for him. "I am," she called back. "The sky has erased us. Vane can send 100 men and they will find nothing but mud. Remind me never to make you angry. You'd bury me and the ground would swear I never existed." "I found you," she said. "I could unfind you." But she said it with her hand still tight in his shirt, and he heard the shape of what she meant under the words the way she was learning to hear the shape of what he meant under his. They came out of the storm at dusk into a shallow overhang, soaked to the bone, and she would not let him have a fire even then. She stripped the sodden packing from his side by the last light and hissed low at what she found, the flesh angry, hot to the touch, the fever already coming up under his skin like the storm had come up under the sky. "Don't," he said, catching the worry before she could arrange her face over it. I know that look. I looked like that at a heifer that didn't make the winter. You are not a heifer. No, he agreed. You'd have wept over her more. She did not laugh. She pressed a fresh dressing to him and bound it tight and lay down close along his good side to give him her warmth against the wet cold of the night. And she told herself it was the healer in her doing it, and she knew it was a lie, and she let herself keep the lie a little while. Nolly, his voice had gone slower, the fever was in it. That word I gave you in the canyon about seeing you home. Sleep. A word doesn't sleep, he said. It stays awake even when the man's asleep. That's the whole use of it. His hand found hers in the dark and did not grip, only rested, and that was worse, somehow, than gripping. I meant it dry and I mean it wet, that's all. I know, she whispered, and she did. They did not sleep long. She woke him in the black hours because the horses she had no horses to hear had told her nothing. It was the birds, the small ones gone silent all at once off to the north, and she had them up and moving in the space of 10 breaths. The 2 men came out of an arroyo an hour past dawn, close enough that there was no more running. Nolly saw them first, of course. 2 Avanes, hard men on hard horses, spread wide to take the low ground on either side. She had her knife and a stolen pistol with 3 shots in it and a wounded man who could barely stand, and she was already calculating the arithmetic of dying well when Caleb's hand closed on her arm. No, he said, his voice had changed. The fever was still in his face, but it had gone out of his voice entirely, burned clean by something older. Not you, not today. He gave her own first words back to her, and it broke something loose in her chest to hear them. There's high rock behind you. Get to it and go north and don't stop for the sound of it. Caleb, you carried me 20 miles I don't remember, he said, checking the pistol's loads with hands that did not shake though the rest of him did. Let me buy you one. That is not the bargain. It's the one I'm making. He looked at her, and there was the whole of him in it, every plain and stubborn, honest inch. My word was to get you home. It didn't say I'd be pretty about how. Then he was moving, down and to the right, loud on purpose, drawing their guns away from the rock where she stood. A wounded rancher stumbling into the open like the easy kill he pretended to be. And the 2 men turned toward him because men always turn toward the thing that runs. She did not run north. She would tell herself later that she meant to. Instead, she went up the rock silent as water and came down behind the nearer rider as his attention narrowed to the staggering man below, and the arithmetic changed, because it was 2 against 1 no longer. Caleb's first shot took the far man out of the saddle before the fool ever thought to look for a second enemy. Her knife did the quiet work of the near one. It was over in less time than it takes to tell, and it was not clean, and neither of them pretended it was. She reached him where he had gone down to one knee, the pistol slack in his hand, the front of his shirt soaked dark and spreading. The effort had done what she feared. He had torn open deep, and the fever had him swaying like a man in a wind she could not feel. You didn't go north, he said thick. No. Good, he breathed and pitched into her arms. She caught him. She who had carried him once already through country that wanted them both dead, gathered him up again. Heavier now, a man half made of muscle instead of the near corpse she'd first dragged from the wash, and got him across her shoulders the way her mother had taught her to carry a deer, and she stood, and her knees held. You are heavier than the first time, she whispered against his ear and felt him try to laugh and fail. You have been eating my food. She walked north with him. She walked all that day, resting when she had to, talking to him low and steady so the sound of her would keep him tethered to the world when the fever tried to carry him off. She told him the names of the mountains in her language, and what her people called the hawk that turned above them, and what they called the man who kept his word. She was not certain he heard any of it. She said it anyway. You are mine to bring home now, she whispered when the stars came out, the words falling out of her before she could decide whether to be afraid of them. Do you hear me, Caleb? You are mine. I have decided it. You do not get a word in this one. At the edge of the second night, she came over a low rise and stopped, and her breath went out of her all at once. Below and ahead, faint and blue in the last light, lay the broken cedar country that marked the near edge of her people's land. Home, 2 days off, no more. And behind her, strung along the ridge she had just crossed, black against the dying west, sat a line of riders, more than 2, more than 10, sitting their horses in the terrible patience of men who did not need to hurry, watching her carry him down into the last of the light. She shifted his weight higher on her shoulders, turned her face toward home, and began to walk. Chapter 6. Her people. The riders on the ridge did not come down. Nolly watched them the way she watched, whether without hurry and without hope, her body still beneath Caleb's weight where she had propped him against the rock. He was burning again. She could feel it through his shirt, the fever running up her arm like a second pulse. Behind them, the line of horsemen sat black against the last light, and then, one by one, they turned and were gone the way they had come. They stopped, Caleb said. His voice had gone to gravel. Why'd they stop? Because this is not their ground anymore. She shifted him higher on her shoulder. It is mine. She brought him down the far side of the ridge in the dark, and somewhere in that long descent the land changed under her feet from enemy country into home. She knew it by the smell of the cedar and the sound the wind made in a particular canyon, and by the low fires that appeared below like coals scattered across the floor of the world. She had crossed back into her people's country 100 times as a scout. She had never once done it carrying a white man on her back. A whistle came out of the dark, thin and questioning. She answered it 3 notes, and the night let them pass. They came into the camp with the dogs rising and the fires flaring as people fed them, and Nolly walked upright through it all with Caleb's arm across her shoulders and her own arm locked around his ribs, holding a stranger together by will alone. Faces turned to her. She knew everyone. She saw in them the thing she had known she would see, not welcome, but question. Nolly, a young man, came fast across the open ground, and there was no question in his face at all, only heat. Her brother. What is this? He is hurt, Dahi. Help me put him down. He is white. I can see that, so can you. Help me put him down or stand out of my way. Dahi did not move to help. But he did not stand in her way either, and that narrow choice was as much as she could ask of him tonight. She lowered Caleb to a robe near her own fire, and he made a sound as his weight settled, and his eyes found her in the firelight and held. This your brother, he said. Yes. Tell him I'm obliged for not shooting me. Do not make jokes, she said. You have no blood to spare for it. But something eased in her chest that he could still find the joke at all. She had carried men before who went silent at the end and never spoke again. This one talked. This one had kept talking across 200 miles of country that wanted them both dead, and she had come, somewhere on that road, to need the sound of it. An old woman came through the gathered people, and they parted for her the way the night had parted at the whistle. She was small and bent, and her eyes were very clear. Nolly rose and stood straight before her. Grandmothers, you have been gone a long time, the elder said. You went to find the men who burn our people out of the border country. You have come back with one of the people who sent them. She looked past Nolly to where Caleb lay. Explain this to me, granddaughter, so that I do not have to imagine it. So Nolly told it. She told it plainly, the way a scout gives a report, with nothing added to make herself look better and nothing left out to make it easier. She told how she had cut the sign of Vane's riders in the dry country and followed it to a wash where a man lay dying with a bullet in his side and the buzzards already low. She told how she had knelt over him, meaning only to see whether he could tell her where the riders had gone, and how he had opened his eyes and looked at her not with fear, but with a kind of terrible patience, as though he had already made his peace, and she was only a last thing to notice on his way out. She told how she had said, not today, and had not fully known why even as she said it. And now, the elder asked, do you know why now? Nolly was quiet. The whole camp was quiet, waiting, and she felt the weight of every eye and did not let it move her. He saw the man who leads them, she said finally. He can name him. He can name the one among his own people who sold him. That is worth something to us. She paused. That is what I would have said a month ago. It is still true. It is no longer the whole truth. No, the elder agreed, and her clear eyes went from Nolly to the man on the robe and back. I did not think it was. Dahi could not hold it any longer. Grandmother, they followed her. There were riders on the ridge. She has led the bounty men to our fires with a white man on her back, and you stand here asking her why she loves him. The word landed in the firelight and lay there. Nolly did not flinch from it. I have brought the truth to our fires, she said, turning on her brother, which is more than the men who put a price on our band ever did. Vane hunts us, Dahi. He hunted us before I ever found this man. The bounty on our heads was signed before Caleb Rourke bled a drop. He did not bring the wolf to the door. The wolf was already circling, and now we have someone who has seen its face and lived. Caleb Rourke, the elder repeated slowly as though tasting the name. She crossed to the robe and lowered herself beside him with a grace that belied her years, and she put her old hand flat against his fevered forehead the way Nolly had done on the trail, reading him. Caleb held still under it. Whatever he saw in that seemed unhurried face, he did not look away from it. "You are dying a little," the elder told him. "Ma'am," Caleb said, "I've been dying a little for about a month now. Your granddaughter keeps talking me out of it." The old woman's mouth moved, not quite a smile. "She is stubborn." "Yes, ma'am, I noticed. Why did you not die when it would have been easy?" Caleb was quiet a moment, and when he spoke the gravel had gone out of his voice and left something plainer underneath. "Because she gave me her word she'd see me home," he said, "and I found I didn't want to make a liar out of her. A person's word is the one thing they own outright, ma'am. I wasn't going to be the reason hers got broke." His eyes found Nolly across the fire. "So I gave her mine back. I told her I'd see her safe to her people or die trying. Well, here's her people. Reckon I only half died." The elder sat back on her heels. For a long moment she said nothing, and the fire snapped, and the dogs settled, and the camp breathed around them. "A man is his word," she said at last, to the gathered people as much as to him. "This one knows it. I have known white men who did not, and red men who did not, and the color of them told me nothing. His conduct tells me. He carried nothing to our fires but the truth, and my granddaughter carried him." She rose. "He stays until he is healed. What comes after, the council will speak on. But no one drives a hurt man into the dark from my fire while I still sit at it. Not while he keeps his word. Hear me." They heard her. Even Dahi heard her, though his jaw stayed hard as flint, and he turned and walked out past the fires into the dark, rather than watch his sister kneel again beside the stranger. Nolly worked over Caleb long into the night, and this time she was not alone. The women brought her the plants she asked for and the clean water and the fat to seal the wound, and under their hands the fever finally broke near dawn and left him wrung out and clear-eyed and alive. She sat back at last, her spine aching, and found him watching her in the gray light. "You defended me," he said, "in front of all of them, in front of your brother." "I defend what is mine to defend," she said. "I told you that." "You did." He reached up, slow with weakness, and his hand found hers where it rested on her knee, and she let it. His thumb moved once across her knuckles, and it was the first time either of them had touched the other in a way that was not survival. "Nolly, on the trail you said something, in the dark when you thought I was too far gone to hear it." "You were not too far gone." "No," he almost smiled. "I heard you. You said I was yours to bring home now." The camp was waking around them, but for a moment it was only the two of them and the cold, pale light. Nolly did not pull her hand away. She had crossed enemy country and carried him through it and defended him before her own people and her own blood. And she was done, now, pretending the reason was witness and bounty and use. "You are," she said. And she leaned down and kissed him once, softly, her hand against his jaw where the beard had grown ragged on the trail. And he kissed her back like a man who had waited 200 miles to do it, gentle for all that was broken in him. It was not a claiming, and it was not a rescue. It was two people who had chosen, out of all the ways there were to die, to live for each other instead. When she drew back, his eyes were wet and unashamed, and she felt her own throat tight, and neither of them spoke because there was nothing that needed saying yet. Then a shape blocked the growing light. Dahi stood at the edge of the fire, and he had seen. His face was a war of things, betrayal and grief and something younger and more lost underneath. He opened his mouth, and Nolly braced for the blow of whatever he would say. But it was not Dahi who spoke first. A rider came into the camp at a hard, ugly gallop, one of their own scouts, sliding off the lathered horse before it had stopped. Nolly was on her feet at once, Caleb's hand falling from hers. "Nolly," the scout was gasping. "The border settlement. Vane's men came in the night. They have taken people, the Tsotsi family, the trader, others, held in the old mission." He fought for breath. "There is word carried out. He says he will start killing them at sundown unless the white man and the scout who runs with him come to him. He named you, both of you, by name." The fire cracked. The whole camp had gone still. Nolly looked down at Caleb, and Caleb looked up at her, and neither of them had to say the thing they both already knew, that the wolf had not stopped at the border, that it never would, and that safety among her people had lasted exactly one kiss. "He will not stop," she said quietly. No, Caleb agreed, and set his jaw and began, against every wound in him, to try to rise. So we don't either. Chapter 7, The Blessing and the Bargain. The council fire burned low by the time the arguing stopped, and Caleb had learned enough of the language in his days among them to know the shape of a fight even when the words ran past him. He sat where Nolly had put him, at the edge of the light, his side still bound but no longer weeping, and he kept his hands open on his knees, so every man there could see them empty. They spoke of him as though he were a stone dropped in their water. Some said the stone should be carried back out and left where it was found. The bounty riders came for stones like him and for the people who sheltered them. One old warrior with a scar like a dry riverbed down his cheek said the white man's trouble would burn their lodges, and he was not wrong, and Caleb did not blame him. Then the elder lifted her hand, and the fire seemed to lean toward her. She was small and bent as a wind-shaped juniper, and when she spoke the young men stilled the way cattle stilled before weather. Nolly translated low at his shoulder, her breath warm against his ear, and Caleb heard his own story come back to him changed, not the tale of a rancher who had gotten himself shot, but the tale of a man Nolly had chosen to carry, and a man who, weak as a new calf, had turned her from a flooding river and stood in a canyon mouth with a knife against a scout twice his weight. She says, Nolly murmured, that a man is not what walks into camp. A man is what he does when he thinks no one who matters is watching. And what did I do, Caleb said, when no one was watching? You kept your word. Nolly's voice caught on the last of it, and she did not look at him. She saw it in me before I said it. She says I do not look at strangers the way I look at you. The elder spoke again, longer now, and around the fire the faces began to change. The scarred warrior looked into the coals a long while and then gave a single grudging nod, the way a man pays a debt he had hoped to argue out of. Only one face did not soften. Nolly's brother, Dahana, stood across the fire with his arms crossed and his jaw set hard as flint. He had hated Caleb from the first hour for the color of him, for the guns of men who wore that color, for the sister who had ridden into enemy country and come back leading a white stranger by the reins. He had not spoken through the whole council. He spoke now. He asks, Nolly said, and Caleb heard the strain in her, what the white man will give. He says the people do not sell blessings for gratitude. Caleb got to his feet. It cost him. The wound pulled and his breath went short, but he would not answer a warrior sitting down. He looked past the fire to Dahana and spoke plainly, and waited between each thought so Nolly could carry it across. I've got nothing to give that's worth your sister, he said. No cattle left, no land I can reach without dying for it. I came into your camp with a borrowed shirt and a hole in my side. He let that sit. But I gave her my word on the trail that I'd see her home or die trying, and here she stands home, and here I stand, breathing. A man's word is the only thing he owns that no one can take off him. Mine's hers now. That's the whole of what I have, and I'm not fool enough to pretend it's enough. I'm only telling you it's true. Dahana did not answer, but he unfolded his arms, and that was something. The elder studied Caleb across the light for a long moment, and then she smiled, and her smile was a canyon full of years. She said a word Nolly did not translate right away, and the women near her made a sound low in their throats, a warm, rushing sound like the first rain on hot ground. What did she say? Caleb asked. Nolly's eyes were bright. She said yes. They did not wait. Among her people, the elder said, a thing seen clearly should not be left to spoil in waiting, and there was a storm coming faster than any ceremony, Vane's storm. So the blessing was made under the same stars that had guided them out of enemy country. They dressed her in the morning. Caleb was not allowed to see it and did not try. He sat with the men and let an old woman press something sweet-smelling into his palms and mark his brow with it, and Dahana stood beside him without speaking, which Caleb understood by now was as close to friendship as the man would come before he meant it. When Nolly came out of the lodge, Caleb forgot the wound and the storm and the whole of the country that wanted them dead. She wore soft-worked buckskin the color of cream, worked with beads that caught the sun in small, hard sparks, and her hair was dressed with care he had never seen her spare for herself on the trail. She had crossed 100 miles of hell for him with dust in her teeth and blood on her hands, and he had thought her the finest thing the earth had made even then. This undid him differently. She walked to him the way she did everything, without hesitation, without asking leave, and stood close, and he saw that her hands were not quite steady. You're shaking, he said low, so only she could hear. So are you, Nolly said. I've been shot. What's your excuse? Her mouth curved. I have never given myself to anyone. I did not know it would feel like standing on a cliff edge in the wind. Then hold on to me, Caleb said. I'll hold on to you. That's the whole arrangement, near as I can tell. The elder spoke over them, and the band gathered close, and the words were old, and Caleb did not need all of them. Nolly gave him the ones that mattered, whispering them against his cheek so he could give them back true. He spoke his vow first in his own tongue, and then, clumsy and careful, in the few words of hers she had taught him on cold nights, that he took her not to keep but to walk beside, that where she scouted he would ride, that her people were his people and their fights his fights, that his word, sovereign and whole, was hers until the buzzards had him. Nolly answered him. She named him hers, not the way a hand claims a horse, but the way the land claims the rain, taking what it has been waiting for. You are mine to bring home, she whispered, the same words she had breathed over him in the dark when she thought he was too far gone to hear. And now you are home, and now I keep you. Then she said the rest of it only for him, so soft the fire could not have carried it a foot, and Caleb bent his head to hers, and they were bound. And the people made that warm, rushing sound again, all of them, even the scarred warrior, even at the last, Dahana. The bargain came after, when the singing had quieted, and the fire was banked, and the hard truth of the world walked back into the circle. The rider Nolly had sent out 2 days gone came back at dusk with his horse blown and his face gray. Vane had not turned back at the border. He had taken a camp of Nolly's cousins to the south, women, an old man, 3 children, and put word out along the settlements that he would trade them for the white witness and the woman scout, and burn the country between if he was refused. The deputy had signed the notice with a lawman's name to make it legal. It was pinned to a fence post a half-day's ride out. The band went quiet in the ugly way of people counting their own dead ahead of time. They'll come here, the scarred warrior said. Whether we go or not, he does not care which of us he burns. Then he does not get to choose, Nolly said, and she stood, and Caleb stood with her. They laid it out together at the fire, the 2 of them talking over each other and finishing each other's thoughts the way they had learned to on the trail. Caleb knew Vane, knew he was greedy past sense, knew he could not stand to be made a fool of in front of his own men, knew he would chase a sure thing straight off a cliff before he would let it walk away laughing. Nolly knew the land, every dry wash and false trail and box canyon between here and the river, every place a small number of people could make a large number bleed. We give him what he wants, Caleb said. Us, out in the open, away from the camp. He can't burn a village he thinks he's about to catch. He'll leave the hostages guarded light and ride for the bigger prize himself. He always rides for the bigger prize himself. And we lead him into ground that fights for us, Nolly said. The people take the camp of my cousins while Vane's eyes are on us. No lodges burn here, no children under his gun. It's a bad plan, Dahana said. He had come to the fire. He stood at his sister's shoulder now, not across from her. 2 of you against all of his. It is a bad plan. It's a bad plan, Caleb agreed. It's the only one where your people don't pay for me. I'll take a bad plan over that. Dahana looked at him a long moment across the low light, and something in the young warrior's face finally broke and reset, the way a green bone knits. Then it is 2 of you and me, he said, and 10 who ride at my word. My sister does not go into that country with only a white man to guard her back. He almost smiled. No offense to the white man, he has only lately learned to walk. None taken, Caleb said, and found he meant it and found his throat tight. They rode out at first light the next morning, but the night before they belonged to no one but each other. Nolly took him away from the fires, up onto a shoulder of rock where the whole dark country lay open below them, the way she liked to sit and read the land even when there was nothing to read but stars. Caleb lowered himself down beside her, careful of his side, and she fitted herself against him without a word, and for a while they did not speak at all. I keep thinking on the wash where you found me, Caleb said finally. How I'd made my peace with dying, funny thing to think about tonight. Do you regret it, Nolly asked, that I would not let you go? Not for one breath, he turned her face up to his. Whatever tomorrow costs, I'd pay it twice to have had this, you hear me? Twice. Then hear me, she said, fierce and low. We do not die tomorrow, Caleb. I have carried you too far to bury you now. You come back to me, say it. I come back to you, he said. That's my word. And you know what my word's worth. She smiled against his mouth, and out in the dark somewhere a night bird called, and she whispered the last of it, the words she had given him at the blessing, the ones for no one else, and he held on to her the way he had promised, and she to him, while the stars wheeled slow toward the morning that would try to take it all away. Chapter 8, The Long Dark. They rode out an hour before dawn, when the desert was still the color of ash, and the cold sat in a man's bones like a debt. Caleb went first down the wash on the buckskin the elder had given him, and Nolly came behind on her gray mare, and neither of them spoke, because everything worth saying had been said in the dark the night before, in whispers against skin, and to say it again now would be to admit they feared they might not say it later. The plan was clean the way her plans were always clean. They would let themselves be seen at the old stage road below Antelope Spring. Vane's riders would come for the bounty and the witness both, and Caleb and Nolly would draw them east, into the broken country where the land itself was a weapon Nolly knew how to swing. 2 days of running, of false trails laid and doubled, and Vane's guns would be pulled a hard ride from the band's camp, chasing ghosts through country that ate horses. That was the bargain. Bleed for us, and we will bleed for no one but ourselves. "You are quiet," Nolly said, when the light came gray over the eastern rim. "I'm counting," Caleb said. "Days to the spring. Guns Vane's likely got left." He looked back at her, and the sight of her steadied him the way it always did now, the way water steadied a man who had gone too long without it. "And I'm thinking your brother didn't want us to go alone." "D.A. wanted to ride with us. I told him the camp needs a warrior it can trust." A faint line touched her mouth. "He said I only wanted him behind so I would not have to watch him die." "Was he wrong?" She did not answer that. She lifted her chin toward the notch in the hills where the stage road ran, and Caleb followed her look, and he did not need her eyes to know that something was already wrong. There was dust on the road, but it was coming from the west, from behind them, from the direction of the settlements, not from Vane's camp in the east where they had reckoned him to be. It came fast, and it came in a wide line, the way men rode when they already knew where their quarry was and only meant to close the fist. "That's not right," Caleb said. "He's early. He's a full day early, and he's on the wrong side of us." Nolly had already turned the mare. "The deputy," she said, and there was a cold certainty in it that frightened him more than any curse. "He sold Vane's own hour. He did not wait for the trap. He set his own." She was reading the dust, the spacing of it, the second smear of it rising now from the north. "They are on 2 sides. They have known since we left the camp." Her eyes came to his, and for one heartbeat there was something in them that was not the scout at all, something young and human and afraid, and then it was gone, folded away because there was no time for it. "We are the ones being herded, Caleb, not them." "Then we don't run the way they want us to run." He wheeled the buckskin toward the broken ground to the south, the one gap the dust had not yet filled. "South, the lava field. They can't ride us down in the rocks." "Go," she did not follow at once. She had drawn her rifle across the saddle and turned the mare crosswise to the western dust, buying him the first seconds with her body the way she had bought him everything else since the day she found him dying in a dry wash. "I am behind you. Ride." He rode, God help him, he rode, because she had told him to and because a scattered pair had a chance where a bunched pair had none, and the buckskin took the loose slope down into the black rock in a slide of shale and dust. The first shot came flat across the morning, and then the morning came apart. They were among the guns before he understood how the guns had gotten there. 3 riders rose out of a fold of ground he would have sworn was empty, the deputy's doing, men placed in the night by a man who knew the country because he was paid to know it. The buckskin screamed and went down under him, shot through, and Caleb hit the lava rock hard enough to white out the world, and when it came back he was on his knees with his pistol in his fist and no memory of drawing it. He killed the first man off his horse at 10 feet. The second he missed, and the ball took him low on the left side, the very place Nolly had cauterized and packed and prayed over, torn open now by fresh lead, and he went down into the rocks with the fire of it eating up through his ribs. He heard far off Nolly's rifle speaking in its steady, unhurried voice, once, twice, and a man cry out, and then hooves, so many hooves, closing. "Caleb," her voice, then it changed. "Da, no, get back, get back." Her brother had come. Of course he had come. He had never meant to sit behind while his sister rode into a fist. Caleb dragged himself up onto one elbow in time to see the young warrior break from the north on a paint pony, riding into the middle of them to reach her, magnificent and doomed. And he saw the deputy, brass star and all. Riding with outlaws, he had sworn a badge against, level a rifle and fire. And he saw D.A. jerk in the saddle and fold and go off the pony into the rocks and not rise. No, Nolly said, it was not a scream. It was worse than a scream. It was a small, cracked human word, and it broke something in Caleb that the bullet had not. She went to her brother. She had to, there was no help for it in her, and going to him took her out of the rocks and into the open, and that was where they closed on her. Caleb saw it happen the way a man sees a thing in a nightmare, unable to make his body obey, 3 of them off their horses and on her, and she fought. She fought like the desert itself, and she took one down with the knife before they pinned her arms. He tried to rise. His legs would not answer. He got his pistol up, and a boot came down on his wrist and ground it into the rock until the gun spilled out of his fingers, and a shadow stood over him against the risen sun. "Caleb Ward," the shadow said, pleasant as a Sunday, "you are a hard man to bury." Vane, older than Caleb, remembered from the wash, grayer, but the same flat coin-colored eyes, the same easy voice that had ordered good men shot over cattle money and never lost its warmth doing it. He crouched, out of reach of Caleb's ruined hands, and looked at him the way a man looks at a horse he means to sell. "You saw my face," Vane said. "That's the whole of it in the end. A man who saw my face at that wash, walking around free telling it. I can't have that. And her." He tipped his head toward Nolly, held now between 2 men, blood on her mouth, her eyes fixed on her brother's still shape in the rocks. "Her the army pays gold for. So this is a good morning for me, Ward. This is a profitable morning. You're a witness I get to silence, and she's a wage I get to collect, and your friend there in the rocks is a lesson the rest of her people will learn from." He smiled. "There's no rescue coming. You're a pash or a day's ride the wrong way, chasing where you meant to send me. I let you plan the whole thing. The deputy just told me the hour of it." He stood and dusted his knees unhurried. "Take the woman, leave him where he lies. He won't crawl far, and if he does, the sun finishes what my man started. Same as last time. Only this time nobody's coming to carry him. They took her." That was the part Caleb could not survive, and did survive. "They dragged her up onto a horse, wrists bound, and she did not beg and she did not weep, and once her eyes found his across the black rocks, and she did not say anything with them at all, because to say anything would have been to give Vane the pleasure of it. She only looked at him. She had looked at him like that in 100 cold camps, a look that meant I am still here, meaning stay with me. Then a rider's shoulder cut between them, and the horses turned, and the dust rose, and the drum of hooves went east and then went small and then was gone. And the morning was just a morning again, empty and blue and pitiless. The same sun that had once refused to kill him now hanging overhead with all the time in the world. Caleb lay in the lava rock and bled. He did not know how long. Long enough that the shadow of a spur of stone crept the width of his hand across the ground. He thought about dying and found it near, and found it would be easy, easier than the wound the rest of it had opened. D.A. dead in the rocks not 30 feet off. Nolly in Vane's hands, riding toward a cage and a hangman's gold. Her people a day away in the wrong direction because Caleb Ward had helped draw them there. The elder had blessed them. The old woman had put her hands on his head and called him kin, and this was what her kindness had bought. A dead grandson and a stolen granddaughter, and a white man lying in the rocks who could not so much as lift his own gun. He had given her his word. In the box canyon, in the rain, with the whole weight of who he was behind it. "I will see you safely to your people or die trying." And in the dark of the night just past, with her breath against his throat, she had whispered the thing that had made his own vow feel small. "You are mine to bring home now," and he had answered it and meant it, and here was what his meaning was worth. A man's word was supposed to be sovereign. His had been the bait in a trap that took her. The sun moved. Somewhere a buzzard turned its slow first circle, the way they had turned over him once before, the day this whole thing began, when a stranger had knelt in a dry wash and told a dying man not today. Something in him heard it, her voice out of memory, flat and unhurried and refusing, not today. He got his good hand under him. The rock tore his palm, and he did not care. He got the other arm to answer, the wrist screaming where the boot had ground it, and he pushed, and the world swung sick around him and steadied. Blood ran warm down his side and into the black stone, and he let it. He looked east, where the dust had gone, and he made himself see her looking back at him across the rocks, still here, and he set that against the whole weight of the dark that wanted to lie down on him and be done. His pistol lay 4 feet off where the boot had kicked it. He crawled to it and closed his ruined fingers around it one at a time until they held. Then Caleb Ward got his knees under him in the lava field with a bullet in his side, and the woman he loved a day's ride into hell, and he said the only thing there was left to say, in a voice no one living could hear. My word. Chapter 9, What a Word is Worth. Caleb Ward got his knees under him in the dark, and the desert tried to take them back. Blood had glued his shirt to his side. His left arm answered slow, as though it belonged to some other man who had died an hour ago and hadn't finished learning it. Below him, past a shelf of broken rock, veins fire threw its ugly orange up against the canyon wall, and every shadow it made was a man with a rifle. He counted them anyway, 4 he could see, 1 at the horses, Vane at the fire, and beside the fire, on her knees with her wrists bound behind her, Nolly. She was not weeping. He had known she would not be. She sat straight as a lance, her head up, watching Vane the way she watched whether she meant to outlive. My word, Caleb said to no one, to himself. To her, across the dark, she couldn't know he'd crawled through. He drew the belt knife she had once taken off him in a cave a lifetime ago, and he began to move. At the fire, Vane crouched and turned a strip of jerky in the coals like a man with no hurry left in the world. You cost me 11 riders, he told Nolly, conversational, and a witness who won't die when he's shot. That's a rare talent in a man. Almost makes me sorry to hang him. He looked at her sidelong. Almost makes me sorry to collect on you, but the army pays gold for your kind by the head, and I am a practical man. You are a small one, Nolly said. Vane's hand moved fast. The slap rocked her, and she took it, and she smiled at him with blood on her teeth, and Caleb, 20 feet up the slope, knife in his fist, understood 2 things at once. That she was buying time, and that she already had her own plan running under her stillness, the way a dry wash runs water under sand. Her bound hands, he looked and saw it, the small horn-handled blade she kept sewn in the seam of her legging worked halfway free behind her back, catching one thin line of firelight. She had been sawing at the rawhide since they threw her down. She had never once stopped. She was not waiting to be saved. She was waiting for him. Their eyes found each other. It lasted the length of a heartbeat, and it said everything a year of talking could not. Now her eyes said. And has answered with you. Vane, Caleb stood up into the firelight. Every head turned. For one blank second nobody moved, because a dead man had climbed out of the rocks, gray-faced and swaying, one hand pressed to a soaked side and the other holding nothing they could see. You want your witness, Caleb said. Here I am, turn her loose and I'll ride in and hang for you smiling. Vane rose slow, delighted. Ward, I'll be damned. You will, Caleb agreed. That part's certain. And Nolly's hands came apart. She did not shout. She simply became motion, pivoting off her knees into the man nearest her, the horn blade opening his thigh to the bone before he knew the fire had a second enemy in it. He went down screaming, and she was already inside his reach, taking his revolver out of the holster as he fell, and then the canyon came apart in noise. Caleb threw the knife. It was a poor throw from a torn body, and it did not need to be good. It caught the rifleman on Vane's right in the shoulder and spoiled his aim, and Caleb was already moving downslope in a controlled fall, snatching the dropped rifle of the man Nolly had gutted. He came up firing. Left of the fire, Nolly called, her voice flat, exact. A scout calling sign, and Caleb swung and fired, and the man left of the fire folded over his own gun. Horses, he called back, because the wrangler was clawing for a saddle scabbard, and Nolly shot him across the flames without seeming to aim, then rolled clear of the light before the muzzle flash could paint her. They had done this 100 miles and 100 nights. They had never once discussed it. She read what he could not see, he stood in the gap she could not reach, and the space between them was a thing they kept alive together, like a fire between 2 hands. A rider broke for the horses, the one with the knife still in his shoulder, meaning to run for reinforcements or for his life. It made no difference. The paint, Nolly snapped, and Caleb understood and put a shot through the animal's saddle horn so the noise of it spun the horse and threw the man, and Nolly was on him in the dust before he could rise. She did not kill him. She put her knee in his spine and her blade at his ear and asked him one question in her own tongue, and whatever he answered, she left him breathing and bound. A witness of her own. She had learned that trick, Caleb thought dimly, from the same practical school he had. Then Vane's second man got lucky. The bullet took Caleb high in the same ruined side and turned him half around and put him down on one knee in the sand. The rifle spilled from his fingers. The dark surged up at the edges of him, patient, familiar. He had felt it in a dry wash under the buzzards. He had felt it every night since. Caleb, not flat now, not a scout's voice. Nolly's cracked wide open. Up here still, he ground out, groping for the rifle, missing it. Finish it. Don't you dare come for me, finish it. She came for him. Of course she came for him. She crossed the open ground with the last man's fire chewing the sand at her heels, and she reached him, and she put her own body between Caleb and the gun and turned and fired twice, and the last man by the horses sat down in the dark and did not get up. Which left Vane. He had a pistol on the both of them at 6 feet, and his practical, patient face had gone to something older and worse. "Well," he said, "isn't this a picture?" Nolly knelt in the sand with Caleb's blood on her hands and her spent revolver hanging empty at her side, and she did not flinch from the muzzle. She lifted her chin. She put herself square in front of the man she'd carried out of hell, and Caleb, dying, he thought, honestly this time, got his hand around a fist-sized rock because his rifle was gone and a man kept his word with whatever was left in his hand. "Get behind me," they said, both of them, at the exact same instant to each other. Vane laughed. "Which is it?" "Mine," Nolly said, and it was not to Vane. She said it looking at Caleb, fierce, final, a claim thrown down like a gauntlet against the whole wide, indifferent dark, not a whisper now, a shout that rang off the canyon walls. "He is mine. You do not touch what is mine." "And she's mine," Caleb said, loud as his torn lungs would carry it, and the word he'd guarded his whole life, the sovereign word, the word that was law to himself, he spent it all at once and gladly. "You hear me, Vane? Whatever you take out of here, you take it through me. That's my word, and it's the last thing you'll ever collect." "Touching," said Vane, and thumbed the hammer back and chose Nolly first. The arrow took him through the throat. It came from the ridge, from the dark, and it was followed by a war cry Caleb knew, had learned to trust across 100 miles. As Nolly's brother came down the canyon wall at a dead run with 6 of the band behind him, and the night filled with hooves and shafts, and the 2 of Vane's men still breathing threw down their guns and begged. Vane sat down against a rock with both hands at his throat. His practical eyes found Nolly, found Caleb, found, maybe, the arithmetic of a life spent selling other lives and the sum of it coming due. He tried to lift the pistol one last time. Nolly took it out of his hand, gentle as taking a knife from a child. She looked at him until the light went out of him. Then she turned her back on him as on a thing already forgotten, and she was reaching for Caleb before Vane had finished dying. "No, no, stay," she was saying, both hands pressed hard over the wound in his side, her forehead down against his. "You do not do this. You did not carry through all of it to die at the end like a fool white man. Stay." "Bossy," Caleb managed. The dark was very close now, and it did not frighten him at all with her hands on him. Always were. "Chian," her brother slid down beside them in the sand, and there was no wariness left in his face, only the fear of a man watching his sister break. "The deputy," he said to Caleb, low and fast, as if a witness's last work still mattered. "He rode with Vane's paper. We took him alive at the mouth of the canyon. He will answer to the army for the false bounty, for all of it. Your word, it will be heard now. You will not hang." "Told you," Caleb breathed toward Nolly. "Practical man, left a live one to talk." "Be quiet," she said, weeping now and unashamed of it. "Be quiet and stay, and I will let you talk for the rest of your life. I swear it before the mountain, only stay." He got his good hand up into her hair, the way he had wanted to since a box canyon in the rain and had not let himself. "Not today," he told her, her own words from the wash, from the buzzards, from the beginning. He gave them back to her like a coin she'd once spent on him. "You hear me? Not today. You carried me home, Nolly." "I aim to stay in it." She made a sound that was half sob and half laughter, and she pressed her mouth to his brow, and her brother was already shouting for the healers, and the band was moving around them with purpose, and Caleb Ward, who had lain down to die under a sun that would not kill him, held onto the woman who was his and did not let go. The fire burned down. The stars came out hard and clean over the ridge. Somewhere behind them, Vane cooled in the sand with his gold ungathered and his ledger closed, and the trail he'd hunted them down went no farther than this. They packed the wound with what she had taught him to name, on the ground where he'd sworn his word and kept it. When they lifted him onto the travois her brother had cut, Nolly walked beside it with one hand flat on Caleb's chest the whole way, over his heart, feeling it beat, as if she meant to keep it going by refusing to let go of it. "You are mine to bring home now," she whispered, hers, from the black night she'd carried him, leaning close so only he would hear. I'm already home, Caleb whispered back. It's not a place, it's you. And the two of them went up out of the canyon together, into her people's country, alive. Chapter 10, Home is a Person. Autumn came slow to the high country, the way good things do when a body has learned not to expect them. Caleb woke to the smell of piñon smoke and the low sound of the camp already at its morning work. He lay still a while, taking inventory the way a man does after he has been broken once and put back together. The wound in his side was a knot of new skin now, tender when he twisted, but it held. The deeper hurt, the one veins men had opened in the dry wash all those weeks ago, had closed cleaner than he'd had any right to hope. He turned his head. Nolly sat cross-legged near the low fire, her hands busy with a strip of rawhide and a knife, her hair loose down her back. She had not slept much. He knew that now the way he knew her. She kept the dark watches even here, even safe. Some habits a scout did not lay down because a stranger asked her to. "You are staring," she said without looking up. "I am," Caleb agreed. Man's allowed to stare at what he means to keep. Her mouth curved. She still would not give him the whole smile easy, she made him earn each one. But he had learned to read the small ones, and the small ones were worth more. The band had wintered decisions that summer. Word had come up from the settlements, carried by a freighter who owed the elder a debt, that the deputy who had sold them all to Vane was in irons. The corruption had not stayed buried, it rarely did once the man holding the shovel was dead. Caleb's testimony, sworn before a circuit judge with Nolly's brother standing at his shoulder as witness, had done the rest. The cattle money Vane had killed for was recovered from a strongbox in the deputy's own barn. The betrayer who had ridden with Vane at the wash, the partner Caleb had once trusted, had been named in open court and would answer for it. "It is finished, then," Nolly had said the night the freighter left. "The men who hunted you, the bounty on my people." "The bounty's void," Caleb had told her. "No lawman left standing who'll honor it, and the ones who'd have collected it are dead or waiting on a rope." He had taken her hand. "You don't have to scout the ridges for them anymore, Nolly. You can hunt because you choose it, not because they're coming." She had been quiet a long moment. "I have never done anything because I chose it," she said, "until I chose you." They married when the aspens turned. It was not one wedding, but two braided into one, and that was the elder's doing. The old woman had watched Caleb through the healing months with eyes that missed nothing. The way he mended tack for the young men without being asked. The way he stood between the camp and trouble as though it were simply the shape of him. The way he never once tried to make Nolly smaller than she was. "He gave his word to bring you home," the elder said in council, her voice dry as riverstone. "I have heard many men's words. This one carried it through fire and did not set it down. A word like that is a kind of home. We will not turn it away." So the band honored them. There was the smoke and the blessing, the old songs Caleb did not know but stood respectful before, the paint and the gifts and the elders' hands on both their heads. And there was, too, the thing from Caleb's world, a plain gold band he'd sent the freighter to fetch, slipped onto Nolly's finger while her people watched, because he wanted her claimed in every tongue he had. The elder herself tied the marriage knot, her old fingers sure on the cord, and when it was done she held Nolly's face in both hands and spoke to her low, in the tongue Caleb was only beginning to learn. He did not need the words. He saw the tears the old woman would not let fall, and he saw Nolly bow her head to receive whatever blessing was in them, and that was enough. Later Nolly told him what her grandmother had said. "You went into enemy country carrying your grief like a stone. You have come back carrying a man instead. The stone is set down. Rest now, granddaughter. You have scouted far enough for one life." Her brother stood as one of the witnesses. That was its own small miracle. The young warrior had hated Caleb once, had looked at the white stranger his sister dragged home and seen only the trouble that rode behind such men. But he had seen other things since. He had seen Caleb take a bullet meant for the band. He had seen him crawl, gut-shot, through the long dark toward Nolly when any sane man would have died where he lay. On the field where Vane fell, it had been the brother's rifle and Caleb's revolver that finished it together, and a thing forged in that kind of fire does not come apart easy. "You are not what I thought," the brother told him the morning of the marriage. He said it grudging the way he said everything, but he clasped Caleb's forearm as he said it. "You fought for us. That makes you ours to keep, and to bury if you ever shame her." "Fair terms," Caleb said, and meant it. "I'd dig the grave myself." The brother almost laughed. From him, that was a benediction. They chose the land together. Caleb's old ranch still stood. The deputy's men had let it go fallow but not burned it, and there was a season Caleb thought they might go back to it. But the ranch sat low in Vane's old country, full of the ghosts of the ambush, and he found he did not want Nolly waking under that particular sky. It was Nolly who found the new place. Of course it was. She had scouted 100 miles of that country and knew where the water ran sweet and where the winter wind broke against the hills. She led him up a long, grassed valley on the edge of her people's range, close enough to visit, far enough to be their own, with a spring that never failed and grass that would fatten cattle 3 seasons of 4. Here, she said, and it was not a question. Here, Caleb agreed. They built it with their own hands and the hands of her people, and in time, a few of his own kind who did not care whose blood a good neighbor carried. A house of stone and timber, a corral, a brand 2 marks joined, his and hers, that meant nothing to any registry and everything to the 2 of them. She still scouted. He had known better than to imagine she would stop and had never wanted her to. When the band needed eyes on the far country, it was Nolly they sent, and Caleb who watched her ride out with his heart in his throat and his pride outrunning his fear. She always came back. She had promised him she would, in the same low voice she had once used to keep him alive, and Nolly did not break a word any more than he did. And he ranched. He was good at it, better with her beside him, because she read weather and land and animal in ways no cattleman ever taught him. Twice she saved the herd, once from a flood she smelled before the sky showed it, once from rustlers she cut sign on 2 days out. Twice he stood between her and a threat with a rifle and a stillness he'd learned from her. The protection ran both ways. It had from the beginning, back at that river crossing when a dying man's reed of a storm had pulled her clear of the water. It always would. On an ordinary morning near a year to the day since she found him, Caleb stepped out of the house into the cold, clean light and found Nolly already at the corral, her breath smoking, her hand flat against the neck of the buckskin she favored. He came and stood beside her. Below them the valley ran down gold and gray toward the far blue hills, and somewhere out in that country was a dry wash where a man had once lain dying with the buzzards drawing their patient circles, certain the sun would finish him. "I think on it sometimes," he said. "That wash, how I'd made my peace with dying, and then there was you kneeling over me telling me it wasn't the day for it." "Not today," Nolly said softly, the same 2 words worn smooth now with a year of living. "Not today," he echoed. He turned to her. "You know why I lived, Nolly? Every mile of it, every fever, every time I should have quit. Because a man's word is the whole of him. I gave you mine to bring you home." He looked out at the valley, then back at her face. "Took me the longest time to understand you'd already done it. You brought me home first. Home wasn't the ranch. Home wasn't ever a place at all." "No," she said. She stepped into him, and he wrapped her against the cold, his chin resting in her loose dark hair. "It is a person." They stood there a long moment, the 2 of them upright and side by side in the good light, where once there had been only a man in the dirt, and a woman deciding whether a stranger was worth the risk of her own life. She had decided he was. He had spent every day since proving her right. "There is frost on the high grass," Nolly murmured against his chest. "Winter is early this year." "Let it come," Caleb said. "We're stocked, wood split. Your grandmother's coming up before the pass is close, and your brother swears he'll beat me at cards, which he won't." He tightened his arms. "Let all of it come. There's nothing left out there that can take you from me." "No," she agreed. "There is not." She tipped her head back to look at him, and this time she gave him the whole smile, the rare full one, the one worth all the miles. "You are mine to keep, rancher. I brought you through enemy land. I will not lose you to a little snow." "That a vow?" "It is." "Then it'll hold," he said, "same as all the others." And it did. The sun came up over the far hills, the same sun that had once meant to kill him, and it found them standing together at the rail with the whole quiet, ordinary day laid out before them. The herd shifting in the low pasture, smoke rising straight from their own chimney, her people's country and his cattle and their brand joined on the land like 2 names spoken as one. Caleb had crossed a wilderness carried in a woman's arms, and had risen and carried her in turn, and somewhere between the 2 they had stopped being rescuer and rescued and become simply this: a man and a woman who belonged to each other and to no one else, home at last in the only place that had ever counted. Nolly leaned into him. He held her. The morning went on, unhurried, unthreatened, theirs. "Come inside," she said at last. "It is cold." "In a minute," Caleb said. Let me look at it a while longer. He did not mean the valley, and she knew it, and she stayed.